Kate Campbell is a social media coach specializing in authors and, more importantly, the author of The Daughter of the Lark. The Daughter of the Lark is a high stakes dystopian story where capture means death and trust is very fragile. And if you love code breaking, secret identities, complex characters, and clean fiction, you're going to love this novel. In this episode, we talk about the strategies of getting into publishing in 2025, the current state of the young adult fiction genre, and her journey into writing as a whole. You can follow her on Instagram at Kate Campbell Author, and I would highly recommend subscribe to her newsletter. It has a lot of really good updates. Without further ado, enjoy. You're currently pursuing I think it's a creative writing journalism degree in university. Huge deal. You're writing a YA dystopian trilogy, also crazy, very quickly growing on Instagram. What got you into reading, and then what transformed that into writing for you?
Yeah, I've always been a reader. I was homeschooled growing up, and I think that gave me a lot of space for imagination. We took weekly trips to the library, and my mom would let us pick out as many books as we could, and I would spend all week reading them. And I think as I got older, I figured out that I did want to write. I loved writing stories. I could go on our old computer and find so many stories that never will see the light of day ever again. But I think I started taking it more seriously in high school. I developed a chronic illness that made it really difficult for me to do what I wanted to be doing. I was pretty active riding horses and just doing a lot of different school activities. And when I was physically held back, I turned to writing and I took it a lot more serious. And I had the idea for Daughter of the Lark, and I've just been full force into that ever since then.
Right on. What kind of books did you gravitate towards when you were going to the library?
All kinds. I mean, the classics like Harry Potter and Percy Jackson. As I got older, it turned into Divergent and Hunger Games, the classic dystopian books. I did a lot of Magic Treehouse when I was really little. Just a lot of, I got into a lot of different series. I did historical fiction, I did fantasy, I did all kinds.
Right on. I could see how that like turned into YA dystopian for you. Was it like did the idea come first and then it was in the genre, or did you kind of know that you wanted to write within the genre? Chicken or the egg? What was the vibe check?
Oh, yeah. I remember writing a lot of short stories in my high school English class. I had a great teacher who gave us a lot of creative freedom. And I wrote a lot of dystopian short stories. I don't know why I gravitated towards that genre. I just always have. And actually, Daughter of the Lark was kind of a combination of several of those stories. And that's usually how a lot of my books start, is it starts from a short story, starts from a smaller idea, and it just kind of grows. So I would say I started off writing short stories that were dystopian, and that just kind of grew my interest for the genre.
I know that I think you had released a book. Was it 24/1 Hunted? Was that the name of it?
Yeah, 241 Hunted is actually
Yes.
a short story. Yeah, so it's a short story based out of the world of Daughter of the Lark. I had been talking to agents about a year ago, and they want to see more growth in platform. So not just social media, like that's newsletter and all of that. And the agent I was talking to suggested kind of creating a newsletter magnet. And so she suggested creating a short story out of the world of Daughter of the Lark. She suggested using a character from Daughter of the Lark, but I actually created a different character. And so 241 Hunted is a short story based out of the world of Daughter of the Lark. He has nothing to do with the other characters, but it's based out of the world, and so you get definitely the world building, kind of what's at stake, and you kind of get to see like a glimpse into my writing.
Gotcha. There's two different paths I want to take here. So I'll say both and then you can pick whichever one that you want. Are you thinking about, or have you already done, other short stories that are within the world of Daughter and the Lark? And then also, on the other hand, for the literary agent, was there something about that meeting that was specific to you becoming like a social media coach and like focusing on how to build like writer platforms?
Yeah, so 241 Hunted is the only short story I've written for the world of Daughter of the Lark. I have other ideas beyond just the trilogy if a publisher were to ever ask for something about a side character one day, but right now 241 Hunted is the only short story. And then from that meeting with the agent, no, the social media thing didn't come out of that. I just have been writing for so long that it's not returning any money yet, and I kind of just wanted a side thing. I've always been passionate about social media, and that's what my original major was before I switched. And I want to kind of monetize some of the writing skills side of it. But I really want to help other writers navigate social media because it's really intimidating. Just to kind of start and feel like you're putting yourself out there, especially as an unpublished author. You kind of feel like you don't really have anything to offer, but I want to show people that they do have something to offer and that growth is definitely possible, even if you're unpublished.
I like that. That's something that I was aiming for with the Myth Dimension, the social media for authors that I'm building right now, where it originally came out because I was really sad that the Twitter pitch wars from like 2023 and beyond kind of disappeared with Elon Musk's takeover. And there hasn't really been a really solid online writing community since. And then, the craze of you need to be a platformed author in order to have a chance at publishing, I feel is unfair, but also kind of just is the way of the world. And I wanted to have something where somebody could talk about their stories and develop those metrics easier while still actually, leading to publishing, like kind of guaranteeing that triumph for them. Was this something where you wanted to go into traditional publishing so badly that self-publishing wasn't on the table for you? Is it a goal or a dream, or what's the feelings and thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I started off wanting to self-publish. I followed a lot of great self-published authors on here and I saw them do it well. You interviewed Amanda Aller the other week, and she was one that I started following. Kayla Ann is another one that I started following, and I saw how well they did it. They've both used Kickstarter, they've both funded their books themselves. So it was just I saw it done really well, and I saw their platforms really growing, and they really built a community. And so I saw that it was fully possible. It's fully possible to self-publish a really well done book nowadays. But back in 2023, I became friends with a couple authors on here, and we decided to all meet up at a writers conference. And there was agents there, and I never had considered traditional publishing. I had kind of just thought it was too far out there. But then when I had this opportunity to go pitch to agents in person and to learn more about the traditional publishing world, I decided to go for it. I ended up pitching while I was there. I got rejected by one of them on the spot, but the other agent requested a book proposal from me, and that really motivated me to finish this book and um, kind of change and implement a lot of that feedback into what Daughter of the Lark has become. And talking to industry professionals and then hearing both sides of independent and traditional publishing, the benefits of both. I just I think I just decided to go for traditional publishing because it became a little bit more real, a little bit more tangible, and I saw the networking ability and the connections that traditional publishing has. I know I'll probably be giving up a lot of freedom with what I can do and what I put in my books, but I'm gonna try for traditional publishing.
I like that. I like the resolution as well. I think that with traditional publishing, I think that most authors feel as though they're selling their life and their soul with their books. But from what like, I'm a writing coach and I work with a lot of different authors as well on the side. And from the agents that I've talked to and from the publishers that I get to talk to through the Myth Dimension as well, I see a lot more of them are liking almost like the Sanderson approach of prove yourself on a trilogy or two and then you like do whatever you want. Le Bardugo, her deal, also spectacular. Um, I don't know. I feel like, especially with what you have going on between the short story that you released, Daughter of the Lark, and I can tell that you have like a lot of other story ideas, which I do want to ask about. I feel like you have like a lot of freedom in writing. Like your fan base seems to come for you first, almost before your book. Like they're not just there for the product, they really like you. And was that intentional going into it? Is that just something that, spiritually bubbled up around you as you were developing the whole thing?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think that with being an unpublished author trying to make your way on social media, I think that you have to believe that you do have something to offer. And like you said, like I feel like a lot of my followers just follow me genuinely because they are interested in what I have to say and they're interested in my book, but I really haven't talked about my book too much just because I want to be careful what I say, just in case I do get traditionally published. And I think it's been really encouraging to see that people are willing to follow me, even though I don't have a book out. I think the goal of social media as an unpublished author is to put yourself out there to create a personality that people want to follow. And the more you're genuine, the more people want to follow you because they trust what you have to say and they want to know more about you, more about your writing style, more about your life, more about your book eventually. And if they like you, they'll kind of like your book.
Right on. Coming from a social media marketing background, why a newsletter and not like a Patreon?
um, I never considered Patreon. Newsletter was something that the traditional publishing world has really pushed for. They just for whatever reason, publishers like to see social media numbers and they like to see newsletter numbers. And the third one is website traffic. So when you give your one sheet away or you're pitching or you're giving a book proposal, they're going to ask you about those numbers. And um, for whatever reason, they're looking at platform more than your book nowadays. They won't look at your writing unless you have those platform numbers that they want to see. So for social media, they want to see a minimum of 1,000 followers, newsletter minimum of 2 to 4,000 followers or subscribers, which I'm nowhere near. But they want to see platform numbers because the industry has changed so much that back in the day, the marketing was all on the publisher, but nowadays it's all on the author. So it's not really necessarily a draw for traditional publishing anymore. Because if you're self-published, if you're traditionally published, you're still going to have to market your book just as hard because publishers aren't doing that anymore. So social media numbers are just platform numbers are just important, and they had just suggested a newsletter to me, so I had never considered a Patreon.
Fair enough. When you're thinking about going into like get digging into the weeds of traditional publishing, going through the rounds of literary agents and stuff, would you recommend physical in person like conventions and conferences over like publishers, lunch marketplace and digital spaces as a whole?
Percent, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Agent is much more likely to kind of give you a response if you're pitching to them in person because the reality is agents receive 300 to 400 emails per week, just people querying them, people trying to pitch their book, and they're much more likely to remember you in person and much more likely to ask to see more or that kind of thing. It's just you have to keep in mind how many emails they get a week, and they're kind of talking to a faceless email, so it's a lot more effective to go in person. I would definitely recommend that everybody who wants to take that seriously go pitch in person. Or I just learned that you can pitch over Zoom. A lot of agents have an option where you can pay like $15 to pitch to them over Zoom and have that
Hmm,
appointment. If you can't go in person, I would say that's your second best option.
right on. Do you have any like other tips and tricks with querying or any industry knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the midst of it, so I'm not gonna pretend like I know everything, but I've learned a lot along the way. Definitely know what you're talking about. Have it all together before you go because a lot of how an appointment works is you'll go in, they'll kind of ask for your pitch, which is kind of like an elevator pitch, which is 20 words or less, and you kind of have to summarize your whole book in 20 words or less. And a lot of the times they want you to give away the ending. It's really interesting, but the pitch kind of has to give away the ending. So on social media, I would never pitch a book the same way I do to an agent because I don't want to give away the ending on social media. Um, and then another helpful thing to have is something called a one sheet. And so you kind of have your bio about yourself, your contact information, and then information about your story. That way you can just hand them a piece of paper and they can keep that. And it's better than a business card because there's a little bit more on there. And then just pitching in general, it's intimidating. So practice as much as you can with family members, with friends. I remember sitting in a hotel room with two of my friends practicing our pitch appointments because we didn't know what we were doing and we were just sitting there like turning bright red and laughing the whole time because we were just so nervous. But the more you do it, the more you're confident in your story, the more you know what you're talking about. That's super helpful. But querying in general, if you're just sending out emails, I've done that a ton. Just really, really doing your research before you send your book or anything like a query letter to anybody because agents receive so many emails every week. A lot of times those emails aren't targeted towards them. So they're just sending, copying and pasting their query letter and not really researching the agent. So you want to know what the agent is looking for. You want to know what the agent really loves because they're only going to represent your project if they're really passionate about it. So you wouldn't send a self-help book to an agent that only represents high fantasy. Or a lot of times agents will specifically say they don't want dystopian fiction. It's like I read through all of their stuff and it would be a great fit, but they don't want dystopian fiction. So doing your research is super important and then kind of tailoring your pitch or your query letter to that agent is super helpful.
Gotcha. I know statistically, most authors need to write about three or more books before they get published. It tends to be what the numbers are looking like. Like you're usually on book three, book four, whether it's a trilogy or whether they're standalones, there and back again, and then they get the publishing deal. You said yourself, like you're going through the weeds and you're going through all of this stuff. How do you deal with rejection and like getting discouraged and like racking up those negative numbers?
Yeah, I mean, that it's really difficult to deal with rejection, but if you go into it prepared, you'll go into it knowing that you're gonna get rejected. And I have a really funny way of coping. I end up printing out all of my rejection letters and I have a binder full of them. And my parents and best friend and boyfriend are all like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" But it's kind of like my in your face moment. Like, so when I do succeed one day, I'll have this binder full of rejections to prove that these people rejected me, but I still succeeded anyways. So just kind of having a mindset that you're gonna get rejected, but you gotta keep fighting. It's really slow, but kind of believing that somebody out there is gonna believe in your project. And then another thing is kind of separating yourself from your project. So I've spent years of my life pouring everything into this book, and so it feels like I'm so intertwined with this book. But just because somebody is rejecting my book doesn't mean they're rejecting me. I have to be so careful to separate myself from that, or else I will get my feelings hurt and I'll be devastated and lock myself in my room for days. But instead of doing that, I really just try to separate and compartmentalize and to hold on to the fact that I'm going to keep writing no matter what. I'm not going to stop just because somebody rejected me. And I'm going to keep believing that somebody out there is really going to believe in my project.
I know that when I'm working with clients, I get that same sentiment with joining writer critique circles or like online communities where they have to share their work, and people are much more brutal over keyboard than they are in person.
Love that.
How do you set up those like online boundaries or like emotional gateways to protect yourself from any like negative reviews on Goodreads that might, catch you on a bad day? Do you have a process for that?
Um, I'm not sure because I've never published anything, but I know on TikTok people are a lot meaner than they are on Instagram. I've just noticed that. So when I pitch my book on TikTok or post a video, a lot of people are pretty brutally on there. I pitched it. I kind of did like a practice pitch on TikTok a couple weeks ago, and asked if people would be interested in reading this, and somebody was just like, to be honest, no, and gave their reasons why. And I mean, that was helpful to know how to pitch it in the future. But at the end of the day, I have to remember that the people who will really love my story will find me. I just have to keep being myself on social media. And it might not necessarily be the book for them. It's not the book for everybody. And so I have to remember that and have to kind of keep a mindset of this person doesn't know me. This isn't a personal attack against me. They don't know my story. They don't actually know my writing because I didn't share any of my writing. That was just a quick 30-second pitch on there. So that has nothing to do with my actual book. So kind of just letting it roll off. Some comments or um, rejections hurt more than others, but you just kind of have to let it roll off and to hold on to truths you know about yourself and about your abilities and about your book.
Yeah. I know that I will sometimes recommend that people get a community that supports them first before their work so that they can have something to fall back on, whether it's just like friends and families who like know what you're doing and support you, or if it's an online writing group or your circle of friends who know what you're going through regardless of the thing that you're publishing before you go for something where people will see you as a good author or being like putting out good work. Is there anybody that one supports you like through thick and thin, and then is there anybody you're considering for that like acknowledgments in the front of the book?
Definitely. My best friend was the first person to ever read my book, and it was a horrible first draft. Like going back now, I just giggle like reading the entire first chapter. I can't. It's too painful to read past that. But she read the whole entire first draft, and she stuck through it, and she annotated the whole thing. And her support has meant a lot because she's read more recent drafts now and has been able to point out the growth in my writing, and she's always somebody that can sit there and listen when I'm stuck, when I need more ideas, and she's given me a lot of ideas. And then my parents have always been super supportive. They're not necessarily readers themselves, but they love what I'm doing and love that I'm putting myself out there and working really hard for this. And so they're always somebody I can fall back on. When I do get tough rejections or emails, they're the people I go to talk about it, and they talk me down and talk me through it. And my boyfriend is also not a reader, but he's been extremely supportive of me through the entire thing. And he'll let me sit there and read chapters to him, or just let me talk about my most recent rejection and kind of talk me through it. So I do really have a good support group, but I think having a support group of non writers and writers is equally as important because I have my people I can go to, and then I have friends who are writers. And so, two of my really close friends who I went to that conference with, they're both writers, and they're both kind of in the midst of a similar um, space of writing. One friend is signed with an agent, but she keeps getting a lot of rejections from publishers. My other friend is still in the midst of editing, and so she hasn't started pitching or querying yet. But we're all kind of in the same boat, we're kind of in a similar spot, and we understand what each other is going through because we're all writers. It's one thing to sit there and explain it to a non-writer, and it's another to just to kind of use the lingo and the jargon of the writing world and to talk to friends who have been through it and who know what I'm talking about and know what's going on. And having them as a support group has been so helpful.
Yeah. I know there was a video that I think you published to Instagram way back that you had mentioned that you FaceTime a friend and write together. Is that like a regular ritual?
Yeah, yeah. One or two times a week, we try to sit down for an hour or two and write together. We're long distance. She lives in Florida. I live in Ohio, and so we can't get together more than like once or twice a year. But we do try to do weekly FaceTime calls and write. And it was so fun. Last week, she finished the first draft of her fourth book while we were on the phone, and so we got to celebrate that together for a second. And I'm so discouraged with edits right now, but she's kind of keeping me going and keeping me motivated. And I have that weekly accountability of, okay, I'm going to sit down and this is going to be super focused for a little while and we're going to do nothing but write. And I mean, we'll sit there and talk for a couple minutes, but we usually set like a 25-minute timer, write for the entire timer. And then we'll talk about our progress in between and then just keep doing it until one of us has to go. So that's been super helpful.
That's wild. I don't think I've ever had like a really great like writer partner. I always get distracted with what they're doing, or I get like a little bit
Yeah.
too into what I'm doing and I lose track of the scene. Do you have like well, I'll ask it like this. What is your writing ritual or your like writing routine for the regular days?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna pretend like I write every day, but when I do have really focused time, I really try to devote time to writing. And that usually means putting away my phone because I'll be too tempted to sit there and scroll on Instagram Reels. Um, I usually light a candle and I have some sort of drink with me. So whether that's coffee or iced coffee, or I've been really into just like these fake sodas that are just sweetened with like fruit and stuff. Those are really fun. So I like to have some sort of fun drink with me. And I try to go back to my room and just sit where it's quiet and just write for a little bit. And I don't put pressure on myself if I'm not feeling good enough to write one day. Or some days I'll have really good writing days where I just get a lot of words done. And if I'm stuck, I always try to keep a notebook with me and I sit there and try to figure out why I'm stuck. And then I brainstorm all the different ways to get myself unstuck. Or if I'm having a ton of imposter syndrome, I'll sit there and write out um, kind of reasons why I'm doing this and remind myself I am a good writer and I'm still learning and I'm still growing and I have to remember why I started this in the first place. So yeah, I would say lighting a candle, having a drink, and having a notebook next to me in a quiet space. That's my writing ritual.
The core essentials. Yeah, I remember when I first started writing, well, not when I first started writing, but especially in like the last few years of really trying to develop my own stories. Um, I would do all of my plotting and world building at a cafe, and I would have like a very specific order and like get into the groove of it. And I would do all of my drafting at home.
Oh
And
wow.
now that I'm at the point of editing, I'm trying to find like a good third location, and I'm in between printing off like the stack of paper and bringing it to the park and like sitting there and hoping that nothing blows all around. I haven't figured it out so far, but yeah, it's really interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, that's a cool ritual. I like that.
Do you have any like so you've done the short story. We're working on Daughter of the Lark right now. You definitely have ideas for other books and stuff. Is it same genre? Are you like into that like dark and moody thing? Are you thinking of doing like something crazy left field after you're done with it? What's the vibe?
I'm trying to stay within the same genre. Since I do want to be traditionally published, a lot of times, especially if you're a new writer, your publisher wants you to stay within your genre. And at first, when I learned that, I was like, oh gosh, like I don't have any other dystopian ideas. I feel like I'm pouring everything I've got into this series, but I have so many more ideas now. I'm kind of working on the second book on the side, just kind of drafting it. It's not really going anywhere right now. But I have kind of a side project that's also dystopian. Very, very different from what I'm writing right now. Um, it would be a standalone, not a series, which is funny because I always pictured myself as a series only writer. But I have a standalone idea and it's dystopian, but it's very different from what I'm writing right now. So I'm very excited about that project. It's fun to have a couple side projects to kind of distract myself and to motivate myself. Because I've been doing editing for so long, my brain is so tired of reading the same thing over and over again. It's fun to kind of have something on the side to work on.
Right on. I know that you don't have to confirm or deny, but I have a guesstimate. So I grew up in Newfoundland. My family's from like the east coast of Canada on the island, and one of our neighbors he used to domesticate the wild horses that roam around Newfoundland. So every summer when we would go down, he would teach us like that's how I learned how to ride was like bareback just on like a freshly broken horse, which was super fun. Definitely not dangerous, but it ended up getting my two younger sisters into equestrian. They did it for a number of years. Growing up in Newfoundland and like being part of like the naval heritage and like very National Geographic kind of stuff, definitely influenced my writing. I know that you mentioned on this call, but then you've also talked about before also being into horses. Is there something in that area that you're incorporating? Yeah, a little bit.
Oh yeah. Not in book one, but in later books, there's definitely going to be some horses involved. Oh yeah. I'm super excited because I'll kind of give like the setup of the world. The setup of the world is it's very post-apocalyptic in Daughter of the Lark. Like picture kind of in a country torn apart by civil war. Um, the enemy dropped EMP bombs, and so there's no computers, there's no power grid, nothing. So everybody's kind of on the run, surviving on their own. And a lot of cars nowadays are run off computers, and so no car is working. So they're relying on walking on foot or other forms of transportation. And later in the book, some of the characters do find a group of horses that they use. But I won't say any more than that. But yeah, I horses have heavily influenced everything I do, and so I had to incorporate them.
Perfect. Very, very cool. I wonder when you're doing like the world building for that, was it something that you that came naturally and you felt like you were diving directly into like the plotting and the characters, or did you like take some time to like really think about the world?
World building is how it started. Like I love world building, and I kept a blank sketchbook of just tons of different ideas, and some of them I've used and some of them I haven't, but it started from the world building and slowly the characters came to life and then the plot came to life, but it definitely started with world building. I had a conversation with a friend about the what ifs of if somebody were to drop EMP bombs, take out the computers, who would survive, who wouldn't, and that kind of sparked like, okay, what if this happened, or what if this happened, and the world building took off from there. That is probably my favorite part of writing is world building.
For the sketchbook, do you like draw the ideas or do you just write them down?
I just wrote them down. I'm
Okay.
not much at this. Yeah. It was more just writing them down. I had seen my uncle do something really similar. He's never written a book, but he's got like story ideas. But he just kind of jotted down character ideas, names, ideas for plots, and he had drawn a couple sketches of like dragons and stuff. But I decided that I wanted a sketchbook too, and that's around the same time I had the idea for Daughter of the Lark.
That's really cool. I do all of mine like whenever I have a writing idea, I go through Notion. I'm a big like online cloud stuff. I like having the interconnectedness. But I know like I met somebody a number of years ago who their all of their fiction work existed purely out of leather-bound novels, and they would get the front cover engraved so that they could separate whether this was manuscript or whether this was like character background and stories and stuff like that. And they just had like tomes that they carried around with them. It was so cool.
Yeah, I'm for drafting, I'm laptop only. Like if I'm stuck, I'll get a notebook out and write down a few sentences, but drafting is like online only. Like I don't do anything else in a sketchbook or a notebook other than just like starting out. Um but that's really interesting. I think it's really cool when people have rituals like that.
Between the EMPs and then you mentioned that there's code breaking in Daughter of the Lark as well. What is researching for this series like, and where do you put it all?
Oh my gosh, it's been so fun to research for this series because one of my characters is a code breaker. Um, a lot of the story alludes to this war that happened. It was kind of a civil war, and he was a code breaker for the good guys. And so he has a lot of decoding experience. And I felt like I had to learn some of that, and so one day I taught myself how to code and decode Playfair ciphers. I think I had the idea from National Treasure 2. I think a character had like a Playfair cipher, and I was like, oh, that seems interesting. I want to try that. And it's actually not that difficult once you figure it out, but there's a Playfair cipher in my story, and the character literally sits there and decodes it. And I still have the post-it note somewhere where I started doing that, but it's been really, really fun to research. And I've done a lot of research on fixing cars because some of my characters do end up fixing a car and are able to drive it around and stuff. So I know nothing about cars, but YouTube is a great resource to figure some basic repairs out and write about it. And so the researching part has been so fun.
That's really cool. What were there any like I know people use comp titles for their stories. I know that not all authors tend to drift that direction, but if you could point to any stories, movies, books, whatever that were like direct inspirations for what Daughter of the Lark are, what would those be?
Yeah. A Quiet Place, the movie was very, very influential. Just the world building of it, like everybody on the run, everybody for themselves. Like there's not monsters or anything in my book, but just the survival and um the family unity and just trying to figure out how to live in a world that's completely fallen apart, and um that was heavily influential for this book. I'm trying to think what other movies and books were influential. I think Darkest Minds by Alexander Bracken was very influential. It's a book that got developed into a movie. That one was really cool because it's really similar to my story. A lot of like found family, unlikely friendships, and just kind of being on the run and being chased by your enemy. Um, yeah, I can't think of any other ones though, but I'm sure there was a lot of other stuff that has influenced my writing over the years. But yeah, A Quiet Place was probably the most heavily influential.
Gotcha. Right on. Yeah. I think we also mentioned it a little bit in preparation for the call, but you have kind of like a philosophy in a way of keeping YA fiction clean. We brushed over it really quick. Do you want to go into more details about what that is?
Sure. I am a firm believer that smut should not be in YA because it's targeted towards 14 to 18-year-olds, and 14 to 18-year-olds are kids, and smut should be in adult books only. And I'm also of the mind that I don't even use like crude language in my books. Like there is violence because I am addressing really hard topics, but I don't swear or cuss in my books. I don't write smut. So I want a book that I would be comfortable sharing with any family member or any friend pick it up and read it. I want to be comfortable sharing that with them. And I think that the YA genre is so applicable to everybody. It's such a general audience that I want a general audience to be able to read it. And so I'm a very firm believer that smut should stay in adult books and not in YA books at all. And I am even an advocate for keeping language in books clean.
Right on. Yeah, I was like 13 or 14, I think, when Hunger Games was like at its peak and like Divergent, all of that stuff was happening. And I remember being that age, like the ideal age for YA, um, the heart palpitations that I got when like Percy kisses Annabeth for the first time, when Katniss is like really having these like hard fought conversations with Gale on like holding hands and stuff like that. Um, and I look at YA now. I know that the genre evolves, but it feels almost like dissonant. I feel like there's like the new adult dystopian or new adult fiction as a whole belongs more towards those adult themes if you want to pursue them or include them in their story. Because also, just on a side tangent, like whenever I'm coaching people, I tend to find that a lot of writers don't know how to use like 18 plus scenes or 18 plus language for the purpose of either character or plot. And so it kind of just becomes like it's there for the sake of being there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like the how YA has become like in its current form might be diverting writers and making writers pressuring writers into feeling like they have to write these or include these kinds of scenes or include these kinds of themes or cliches to belong to the genre when it was pretty good without it. Not to say that it can be like totally removed, but yeah, agreed.
Right. If it's not driving the plot, I don't want it in there.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you were saying with like Percy Jackson or Divergent and those like sweet, innocent romantic scenes, I'm all for that because I definitely have stuff like that in my book and I want to preserve that excitement and innocence of the YA genre and that stage of life. Like my characters are going through that stage of life and my readers are going through that stage of life. And so that needs to be applicable to both. I don't want to be adding in things that don't need to be in there, that aren't driving the plot, that aren't appropriate for younger readers. And so I've always been very careful about that.
I remember I went out to coffee last year. No, beginning of this year, when I was doing the Myth Dimension, when I was like first starting up the company, because I thought that it was going to have more of like a publishing overhead. I thought that I was going to be printing books for the authors that were on the site, but then I kind of divulged from that. But through that, I interviewed a bunch of like owners and founders of publishing companies to see what they thought, like just to kind of get their, pick their brain about a couple of things. And I was out to coffee with this one guy. I won't use his name. We were talking about evolution of 18 plus stuff and like using trigger warnings in books I think is extremely helpful, but it is now at a point where there's so much that you can warn somebody about, and there's so much like content that is being communicated, especially through social media marketing, where people will fully give away and spoil their own books. People will like codify a lot of their tropes as tropes for the purpose of marketing and like go away from plot and stuff like that. And it's hard to figure out as a reader what is in your book without somebody kind of giving it to you full stack.
Yeah.
And if you wanted like a spoiler free thing, where do you go? And that is in publishing, we tend to use genre to communicate things that we feel should belong to each genre in its own place. Everybody else across the entertainment industry, like movies used to do like PG-13, 18 plus, rated R, like stuff like that. Video games rated M, E for everyone. Even albums and stuff like that, like the not safe for work rating and things like that. And I wonder if it might evolve out of self-publishing, but I'm kind of seeing how the industry is responding to it, of having content warnings or like some sort of label that you could put on like the inside cover of a book, or like associate with different series even from a fan level, so that you know what you're getting into, so that your book equally deserves to be called YA dystopian, even if somebody is disappointed if it doesn't match 2025 YA dystopian norms. You know what I mean? Do you have any like
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
that's such an interesting concept, like having like content ratings, just like the way that movies do it. I think that'd be really, really interesting and really applicable to the book industry. And yeah, like you were talking about tropes, like it kind of does make me sad that marketing has completely turned to just tropes and tropes that are kind of overdone. And I feel like a lot of books are now just becoming written for these marketing tropes. It's not so much about the plot anymore. It's more about um, the enemies to lovers or the morally gray or having these certain tropes or character types in a book, simply to sell it to readers. And so it's pulling away from the art of creating and more towards selling a mass produced concept. And I think that originality has really um, been sacrificed for marketing, and it makes me really sad. And so I want to find other authors and creators who are kind of willing to go against the norm. And maybe that's the dystopian author in me, but I want change in it to me. Like I don't want to be so caught up in tropes and in marketing and just try to sell a book that I would sacrifice the story for that.
I completely agree. Yeah, absolutely. I have a feeling that there's going to be, exactly like you said, like a mini revolution or like a sort of rebellious group that goes back to the golden age of writing and like the golden age of publishing, where like in the 2010s kind of era, where everything was word of mouth, and if you liked this author you'll probably like that author, and if you like this book you'll probably like their other stuff. And you didn't need anything more than the book summary on the inside cover. There wasn't anything more than a recommendation from a friend that would get you into reading. And genre meant genre. And I have a feeling that there's going to be this like elastic rubber band that snaps back from what is currently happening in the industry back into, you know yeah, like the golden age in a way, like this kind of like gilded era of let's just be writers again.
Yeah.
um yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of stemmed from social media and from the way the publishing industry has gone. I think that since there is so much pressure on like traditionally published authors now to market their own books, I think that the focus has been pulled so much away from writing. Um, I've always joked with my friends, like, I just want to be a writer. I don't want to have to market my books too. I just want to be a writer at the end of the day. But unfortunately, that's not how the industry is going. But I really, really hope that, like you said, that there will be kind of a snap back to um, the way that things used to be, the golden age of publishing. I'm really hoping for that kind of change to happen.
Yeah, even through callback to the company, the myth dimension, like that was something that have you ever watched any like videos about the myth dimension at all?
I haven't.
It's totally okay. So the social media for authors, I have it links through Google API. So if you link your Google account and you can like select your Google Documents or a Google Drive document or whatever, and it'll read your version history of your draft. So word count, when you like last edited it, and then it'll like summarize your changes, like it started chapter 33 or whatever. Um, the the software that we have, as you write in your Google Docs document, it compiles all of the information, and then it makes a social media post on the myth dimension, and then you can share that to Instagram and Facebook and stuff, being like, oh, like I updated like 1,300 words this morning for this project, so that you can just write and have all of your social media done for you, and you don't have to think about it.
That's so cool. I love that because that is very much a community for authors, and that would be something for writer or for readers to kind of see behind the scenes. Because I feel like that's a really big thing that readers want to see is the behind the scenes. A lot of the videos that I create about writing behind the scenes and what that looks like have done really well. So I think that's a really cool concept.
Yeah. That was kind of what I wanted to get through, like get into as well with like the readers side of it was how cool it would be if Suzanne Collins kind of like subtly announced her comeback by just like created a new project, added 300 words or something. People would
That'd
be
be
rioting.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I really, really enjoy talking to you. I would love to see you on the Myth Dimension whenever it comes out, hopefully by the end of this summer. Um,
Oh, yeah.
where can people find you?
Yeah, people can definitely find me on Instagram. That's probably the best way to stay connected with me. It's just Kate Campbell author is my handle. I'm also on TikTok. I'm a little bit on Facebook, not a ton. And then I also do have a website where you can find my newsletter, and anybody who signs up for my newsletter automatically gets a copy of 241 Hunted. That way you can kind of sample the world building and my style of writing. And probably the newsletter is probably the best way to stay connected with me just because I share so much more on there than I do on social media. I share a lot more updates, real time updates of my writing journey, my querying process, all that kind of thing. So, yeah, my newsletter, which you can find on my website, again, it's just katecampbellauthor.com. And then my Instagram is Kate Campbell Author.
Right on. I highly recommend the newsletter. It's a lot of fun. I'm very happy I joined up. So, yeah,
Yeah,
thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
well, thank you for having me. This was so much